Hello. Noah's Ark is located in the southern gorge of Greater Mount Ararat, between 3,900 and 4,700 meters above sea level, 4 to 11 meters under the surface of the gorge. It is 158 meters in length. It certainly is Noah's Ark. First of all, the interior is filled with cages for animals and also perches or the birds, anywhere from 20 centimeters in width to over 4 meters in width. And we know this from the non-skeletal remains, the feces, the hair, the fur, from every type of animal, mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and insects. There's thousands of animal tracks of every type of animal. Also in the interior of the barge, there's small habitations for very few humans. And one of the notable characteristics is all the furniture is adhered to the walls. There's no free-floating furniture. It's all attached to the walls, similar to modern barges or other vessels, to prevent the furniture from being a safety issue during rough seas. This archaeological site is covered on the exterior and on the interior with bitumen or petroleum-based pitch, and also cypress sap, similar to early Neolithic vessels at the Kuwaiti site of Asabia during the early Neolithic. Also, this site is definitely a maritime barge in that the exterior of the hull angles inward to the central keel. Also, many walls angle inward toward the central keel. You also have the seafaring woods of Cupressa sempervirens, Mediterranean cypress, oak, and teak. In Genesis, the ark is built of gopher wood, which relates to Corporason in Greek, where we get Cupressus, which is the Latin name of the genus for cypress. The ark is primarily built of cypress. The planks on the exterior are not only aged, but also were subject to tremendous stress. And there is evidence throughout the ark for cypress canker. As cypress ages and is subject to stress, it exudes sap that smells very good, but also provides an additional sealant on the wood. The other woods that are present in Noah's Ark are oak, and in a minority of instances, teak. On the interior, the beams and the cypress wood is crafted softwood, cut down, shaped by stone adzes, and taken right into the ark. And you can see Noah and his family were making flat boards and flat planks shaped by prehistoric stone adzes. Also, in the maritime barge is 3 decks. Barnacles are found on the exterior of the hull. There's cross beams throughout the different elevations of the walls to keep the hull intact. Also, there's maritime joinery, specifically coak-and-dowel or mortise-and-tenon joinery throughout the vessel. In addition, the barge has large cargo holds that are filled with early types of legumes, namely cicer, chickpea, pisum, pea, and vicia urvilia, or bitter vetch, which is not common today, but was very common during the transition between the late Epipaleolithic and the pre-pottery Neolithic. The huge cargo holds are lined with bundles of wattle, tree stems, also lined with clay to act as an early desiccant to prevent moisture from building up in the cargo holds. Another feature is the sloping ramps that lead up and down to the thousands of cages for the different types of animals, and also the perches for the birds. And here there's an archaeobotanical assemblage that is just stunning, representing all the proto and pre-domesticated forms of the cereal grains, that comprise the late Epipaleolithic, early Neolithic diet, the site accommodates all the requirements, all the criteria that are mentioned in Genesis, chapters 5 through 10, and also by the Babylonian scholar Berosus. Now that the site has been separated, it was 158 meters when it was together, but is now in an area that covers 2 stadia in width and 5 stadia in length, following the requirements of the Babylonian scholar Berosus. Also, according to Josephus, a Jewish Roman historian, Noah's Ark is braced with cross beams throughout the interior and has plenty of evidence for bitumen on the vessel, which Josephus says is that people took the little bits of bitumen to make talismans during classical times. The site also fulfills one of the mentions in an account associated with Alexander the Great, in that during the summer, the site is located in the midst of an expanse of water, when the glacial ice melts in pools at the bottom of the highest plateau in the southern gorge. Also in the Qur'an, Muhammad mentions the vessel confronted waves as high as mountains. And it's interesting that all along both the starboard and port side, there are ballast features comprising horizontal cypress timbers in front of a linear mass of boulders, but these boulders are from the Levant and comprise sandstone and coral and other sedimentary rock that are totally different from the volcanic lithic material from Greater Mount Ararat. So not only does this site fulfill all the requirements for a maritime barge, but it also fulfills all the requirements in classical archaeology from these ancient texts from Genesis, Berosus, Josephus, Muhammad, and also by a text associated with Alexander the Great. So all of these show very clearly that this archaeological site is Noah's Ark. You can cancel people, you can cancel ideas, but you can't cancel a 158-meter barge from the late Epipaleolithic period, buried 4 to 11 meters under the surface of Greater Mount Ararat, between 3,900 and 4,700 meters above sea level. And ultimately, this sign for the ages, as mentioned in the Qur'an, or this sign that represents, just as in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be, the return of God, cannot be hidden, cannot be lied about. My personal aim is to ensure that this site is protected, preserved, researched, and promoted throughout the entire world, and becomes the world's worst kept secret in archaeology. And I hope you do your part to protect, preserve, research, and promote the rediscovery of Noah's Ark, a site that is valuable to 3 world religions, namely Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and represents the transition point between the end of the Pleistocene and the beginning of the Holocene, the end of the Stone Age and the beginning of the Farming Age, the end of the late Epipaleolithic period and the beginning of the pre-pottery Neolithic period, and the origins of civilization.